Hey, bij jou? Christina? Just an assigned agreement for Mali, a direct trust fund. Are you aware of that one?
We hear you, but Agostina is not. Is she there? Agostina is there? No, I don't. Yes, she's there. She's there. Okay. John is also there. And everyone, people have started to come to arrive to the virtual class. So welcome to Elizabeth. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Monica, can you hear me?
John.
This is Johnny.
Johnny, welcome back. How are you?
Thank you very much. No, you have seen so much of me in one day, eh?
Of me as well. You did the same.
Yeah.
Well, we got to know each other.
Good.
So people
Yeah.
come.
We try to join. I tried to join early this time.
So,
I
yes.
joined early.
Thank you well. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Just bring to people. Okay, key instruction for the participants. Actually, Johnny, we already have quite a few people. We have Anna, we have Elizabeth, we have Florencio. Christine and Sid are also here, together with Aline. Aisha just joined.
Yeah.
Aisha, you should click on call from your computer to activate your microphone. Wait a few minutes more. We start. Showing.
Because I had a few minutes ago.
Yes, wait.
Blah, blah, blah.
And she faced away.
Lima, I guess.
We also have Elizabeth who's also based in Lima. Two, three, five. How many participants did we have? Okay. While we wait for the others to join, just a small reminder, please make sure you have clicked on call from my computer, which is the first button on the left. But I see you don't have the mic. And Eva is okay. Okay. Yeah, now it's okay. Good. When you want to talk, you have to unmute your microphone. So it appears right now. It means that we cannot hear you. But when you contribute, you should put it back to gray. Alexa just joined. Alexa from, let me see, Alexa is from... Europe and Central Asia. Yeah. Alexa, you have to click on call from my computer. also right. Let me see what Blanca is. Welcome, Blanca. Fatima. Where is she? Provota. Blanca. I have to click on it. Okay, let me see. No. Lorenzo, but then we Esther doesn't no Esther. Okay.
She doesn't have to.
No.
She was there this morning, so.
Okay. Okay. O'clock, I think we can start, no? Okay. Shall we start?
Here.
Yes.
The
We have Johnny, and yes, she may join, and I would insist here. Okay. So what is facilitated here, and not all participants came, but they are coming. We already have quite. We have about 6 participants, so it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar. My name is Monica Lita. I work in Delta, the ITC ILO. So you might have met my colleague Tom in the seminar, in the previous webinars, and I am facilitating this webinar, replacing him. As you know, this is the 3rd webinar of the day. We have done other 2 together with Johnny, Agostina, and Sid, and Berlina, and Anne, which is not online. Yes, she might come later. They were our facilitators, our experts. The people can actually tell us about the topic of the day, which is domestic funding, and provide us with expertise, instructions, and some guidelines. This is our first webinar. We already organized 2, one on SDG and the other one on gender. The topics were decided on the basis of the results of TNA, training analysis, that was conducted together with Pardev and HR. So there was the ILO in Turin, Pardev and HR designed this TNA and conducted it together to identify what are the major interests and needs for colleagues all around the globe. So the funding had to be one of these hot topics, a topic around which there was a need for discussion. And it's my pleasure to welcome and give the floor to Erin Woods, who will actually answer to the first question, which is what is basic funding about? I will give you the floor in 1 second, and I will also give you the privilege as a presenter so that you can show your PowerPoint. But just I want to remind the participants that you should put on microphone. Don't want to talk. While to put it back to gray when you want to talk. And though you can use the chat as much as you want to, but remember you have to select the receiver. You can click on everyone and everyone will receive your message, or you can select the participant to whom you want to talk to. Okay, so if there are other questions, I give the floor to Erin. Your presenter. You ahead.
Thank you, Monica.
Welcome.
So, for anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Erlien Wups, and I work for Pardev at headquarters, where I'm responsible for all domestic funding, as well as a number of other donors. Today we're going to talk about domestic funding. can tell from this graph, the ILO current resource mobilization base is unbalanced and relies heavily on traditional multi-buy donors. That's a problem because the funding environment is increasingly competitive, while traditional donors are reducing ODA and restricting aid to move to a more selected number of countries. Funding.
Lynn, I'm sorry, you wanted to share your PowerPoint because we cannot see it.
You cannot see it. It's
No.
on screen.
You go to share, you have on the top toolbar. Okay, it's coming. Great.
It's coming.
Yeah, just click on presentation, on the presentation mode, that's one. Great.
Yeah.
Now,
Oh, sorry. Apologies for that.
no problem, no problem.
We are. To funding, it's going to be important to diversify our funding base, to pay special attention to member states that have the means to contribute, but so far have not, as well as those that have the potential to contribute more. A scenario whereby the government of a developing country pays the ILO from its own budget to carry a project in its own country, that's what we call domestic funding. Domestic funding can be seen as a step towards self-reliance by the government, and of course, when governments provide their own resources to the ILO, it also shows a very clear commitment on their part. Domestic funding is most commonly used in upper middle income countries, and in particular in South Africa and Latin America. One of the source documents for this webinar is a list of ODA eligible countries. That's a very useful list because it tells you which countries fall under which income category. Though that while upper middle income countries may have the biggest potential for resource mobilization, this does not exclude the least developed countries. These countries often receive substantial budget support from, for example, regional banks, which in turn may be allocated to the ILO. Approvals for domestic funding fluctuate tremendously from year to year. As you see from the table, domestic funding peaked in 2008 and 2014 with annual approvals over $60 million. On average, domestic funding counts for about 4% of total approvals, and we are therefore lagging behind the rest of the UN. In general, in the UN, domestic funding counts for 6% of approvals. The goal of the ILO is to have about 6% in domestic funding by 2017. The other graph shows approvals by strategic objective. And most domestic funding, as you can see, is allocated to employment issues. We also have a high number of agreements related to social protection, but the amounts per agreement are relatively modest. In the resource materials for this screencast, you will find a detailed overview of domestic funding by country and by technical area. Now, it requires proactive engagement from field officers to build trust with member states to make the case for domestic funding. Our partners go far beyond the ministries of labor. In fact, the ILO receives direct support from various ministries, such as ministries of planning, commerce, finance, economic affairs, and ministries of public works. In America and also in South Africa, we have examples of domestic funding from provincial governments. Sorry, Monica, I can hear myself talk.
I hear you.
I can hear myself talk. I have a constant echo.
I see. That's an issue. We don't hear it. Huh? We hear you very well. So I don't know exactly what to do. Let me try to try again.
Okay.
I'm not hearing you very well without any echo.
Yeah, we don't hear any echo. I'm sorry that you do.
Okay, I will just continue. It's good that I'm the only person who's hearing the echo.
For us, you are totally clear.
Indirect domestic funding refers to the situation where a portion of a foreign grant or a loan, for example, from an international financial institute, is transferred to the ILO via the national treasury. In text, the ILO recently signed an agreement with the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which was in fact a portion of funds that the government had received from the African Development Bank. This is an example of an innovative source of funding. As you may know, under Brazilian law, labor prosecutors and judges inflict penalties on violations of labor law, and this can go into millions of dollars. The price of these fines don't go to the treasury, but they are assigned to actions to remedy the original cause of the fine. Proceeds of this fine are now allocated to the ILO, so that's a really novel way of receiving funds. Domestic resources requires a proactive approach, as I mentioned before. Start by making an analysis of the potential for direct and indirect domestic funding. You find out under which ODA category a country falls, then analyze the sources of funds that the country receives, and also how these funds are disbursed. To what do all UN agencies receive domestic funding, and for which policy areas? Are donors about to give loans or grants to your country? What are the plans of the European Commission, the World Bank, and other regional banks? Are there UN funds or perhaps other global funds that the government is eligible for? This type of information is crucial to have, and you find it on the internet and through interviews with key informants. It is really important to build the trust of the government. A government that is convinced of the technical expertise and the competitive advantages of the ILO, and that has seen examples of results and impact of ILO's work, is likely to entrust the ILO with its own resources. Other development partners, governments expect an evidence-based approach. Discussions around the development or the renewal of a Decent Work Country program is a good entry point. It's a way to start exploring with the government how they could contribute to the realization of decent work outcomes, because they are their decent work outcomes. Also keep in mind that there is not always a need for the ILO to provide direct support. Cost arrangements, whereby the ILO delivers technical expertise, while the government funds activities, may be a very attractive way of working with the government. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlene. That's pretty clear. I go back as a presenter. Okay. Much for your intervention and for introducing us to the topic. Are there any questions from the participants? Is there anything you would like to ask Carlene in terms of clarification, or any comments you want to make? Just unmute your microphone to do so. Need someone writing. Okay. Not other questions. I think we can go ahead. We have Johnny from Pretoria. Johnny, you are the director of the office, and I guess you've been working before that already. So, what is your experience in terms of mobilizing domestic funding? What's your experience? What suggestions can you give? What are the challenges? What are good practices? Let us know. The floor is yours.
African case, we have managed to mobilize resources for both the national government and the provincial governments. And the government is in the context of the public work program that we have been running. And we have two colleagues paid for by the South African government, international experts in the National Department of Public Works. And their main function is to advise on the design of the networks program, the strategy, and the rollout design. We have 4 colleagues who are based in the provinces. Their job is to assist the provincial government and the municipal administration how to execute the public programs in a manner that is employment intensive. And this program, as rightly corrected me earlier, is not 25 million, but 27 million. So to this kind of money, you have straight to the national authorities that add that you are giving answers to the priorities of the national government. In South Africa, unemployment is at 27%. If we include discouraged work seekers, it's at 38%. At youth unemployment, it's at 70%. So the public works program is seen by the government as a strategy to address the high unemployment challenge. And so we see the ILO as a partner in executing the public works program to address this challenge. Can't overemphasize the point that Carleen highlighted, that was in the last PowerPoint presentation there by Eileen Webbs, which is relationship. You made a strategic of fitting very well, but as you manage the relationship, you will not be. They need to be confident that you can deliver, and that person-to-person relationship has to be very strong. So we invest a lot of time and effort in this, and I emphasize to the professional colleagues, the 6 international experts we have, the importance of managing the relationship. In my capacity as the director, I am available anytime if something happens that may jeopardize that relationship. I always seek opportunistically for occasions to avail myself to the national authorities to reinforce, to support, and to make that we continue to manage and deepen that relationship. I want to move to another example of where we've managed to raise domestic resources. The example is on technical assistance. No optional activities. Those are undertaken by the national authorities. The second example is where we have a project by Flanders in the tourism sector on competitive and responsible enterprises, a project called SCORE, which is a project run by enterprise. But in Africa, it's focusing on the sector. And it's Flanders which makes the overhead of the authorities, of the ILO officials. But on the program activity side, we have now won interest support from the provincial authorities. And they invested now a lot of money in upscaling the duties. So this example is where we are providing only technical assistance. Is where we are providing operational support to the rollout of practical activities on the ground with the oversight for support for staff by a bilateral donor. Now looking forward to discussing with the national authorities to judge and assess the affinity to take over the administrative costs and the staff costs of the project when the bilateral agreement ends in June 2017. We also had a domestic resource mobilization effort in Namibia, which was in the context of the social protection flow, assessment of the compliance of Namibia with the social flow, and that's funded by the Namibian authorities. And again, in this case, it spoke to the issue of a close proximity of the relationship between the ILO and authorities, but also a demonstrated capacity by the ILO to deliver in the area the national authorities see as most important. These, I think, are the key elements I want to highlight. There are administrative issues related to the carry of the account, related to the one audit principle, related to whether the money is kept in the country or transferred to Geneva, the denomination of the account in US dollars. All are important administrative details that we deal with, but I always find the colleagues are very helpful in addressing these issues. And I try, as director of the office, to put a demarcation between the administrative challenges, the strategic raising resources from the national authorities. And in South Africa, we are now managing to find a useful balance between the two. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Johnny. Thanks for this contribution, for this explanation. I would like to hear from the participants. We have quite a big group this afternoon. We have around 9 participants, and something else to the people, one person from Geneva that just joined. We have different countries represented: Lima, Buenos Aires, Bogota, Brazil from Port of Spain just joined. I would like to hear from them. Now that you heard from South Africa, what would be your reaction from Latin America? Any questions to what Johnny has explained?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, is that you? Hola, ¿qué tal?
Yeah, it's me.
Gusto volver a
¿Cómo
hablar
estás?
contigo. Muy bien.
Vicente.
Welcome back.
So, well, first of all, I want to thank Johnny and for their insights. It's great to know that we are not alone in this effort to mobilize local resources. We are trying to do that a lot in this region, as you know, composed mostly by middle-income countries and high middle-income countries. It's not always easy for some of the administrative issues that Johnny mentioned at the end, and also because of issues in terms of the difficulties of negotiating with governments and build that trust that is essential. But we have good experiences. One very recent from yesterday, a new arrangement, a new agreement signed with the government of Colombia, which is quite big in terms of funding, and it's also politically very important in terms of the post-conflict period that is opening now in the country. So we are very happy with that. We also have good experiences with in other countries. Well, still in the recent past, Chile, as you mentioned, as Erlin mentioned, the case of one local government as well. However, we find certain issues that are difficult to manage, and that happens every single time. And I would like to hear from Johnny on his experience in dealing, for example, the negotiation of the PSC, or the program support cost. It's not always easy to negotiate the 13%, explain the rationale for the 13%, which we, of course, try to do. Sometimes there are national or local regulations that do not allow governments to pay that kind of overhead. So I would like to hear from Johnny what has been his experience in negotiating with the local partners in terms of the PSC. We know the difficulties and the support we get from Geneva, so that we don't need to discuss. We go through that. We have the great support from Adnan and Sitze and Agustina and the rest of the Bad City team. We know that they understand some of the challenges, but it's good also to share the experience that Johnny may have on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Florencio. Sitze may also go back to this later on. Johnny, do you want to reply to Florencio?
Yes. Yes, Florencio, this issue of negotiating program support income is an important one, and demonstrating the fit. But in our case, yes, there's a request to reduce it, and we found the amount of flexibility in reducing it to, I don't know what we have now. CS can correct me what our current standing one is. But in principle, we hire them in as experts, but have the office administrative support. You can see, because the experts are based in their offices, but administration of the support is undertaken by the office. So when approval travel, when there is booking flights, hotels, all the logistical support related to the workshops. For all the 6 experts that are funded in the Public Works program, they only have 1 finance admin person, which is not enough. We try to demonstrate to them the at which they see. For example, 2 weeks ago, they had a big event called the Expanded Public Works National Summit, which was chaired by Vice President, and I went to give some of the opening remarks there. I could see the presence of the ILO beyond the administrative support that they provide, and that convinces them to really run a program of this magnitude with 6 international experts funded by themselves. We need significant backup. We need a lot of support. We take them Florencio to train every year. And that course on project management cycle. To see the ILO, and they're able to appreciate the additional we provide beyond, let's say, direct budgeted staff costs that they have. And in that regard, let me say, that is not where the value add of the ILO and demonstrating the importance of this 13% or 7% is in need of not area of difficulty. You can imagine that they are paying us 27 million, and they see that the 27 million is ministered. There are proper checks and balances. There are proper. The amount of time I spend in engaging with them, they have to see that this are paid for. So we don't really in the struggle to prove to them that value, because they can feel the presence of the ILO, and they understand that for this opportunity cost, when justify the program, they can always call on a wide array. I make available to them specialists on occupational health and safety, specialists on standards, specialists on security. So to see that the 13% is 7% is well justified. So that what the value add of the ILO through bringing all these other additional add-ons, they can rise the 13% or 7% is not in itself a major issue. Thank you.
It's a very clear explanation, and it's also we feel that it's based on experience and the way you manage to show the value add of ILO behind what is normally understood by the national counterparts. Lorenzo, would you like to say anything about that? What's your experience in Lima? Would you manage to do the same?
Yes, of course, it is very much on the office directors rather than on the regional office, but we are able to prove our value to our partners in many occasions, and that has helped. It is a little bit more difficult sometimes in countries where we are not resident and where we have less frequent contact with the constituents. But I get what Tony says. It's all about showing that we keep saying to ourselves that we are expensive, but we may be that expensive. But that, of course, depends on the value of what we bring to the table. It's value for money. Those are the key words now. So we know that the money is more or less there. We know how much we cost. We know our staff costs. So it's about the value that we bring. And if we show that the value is there, then it's easy to make people understand that the money is worth.
Can I just add? Sure. I just want to reiterate what you're saying there. We have the issue of cost, and we also hear that our costs are high. And I say, you know what? There is an expression here on the African continent: if you peanuts, you get monkeys. So it's very little money you're not going to get the quality. The reason why you want to deal with the ILO is we can guarantee quality. And I try to demonstrate that. So when we have an extended public works summit, I ensure and write that it's a director's responsibility. I make sure I avail to that summit two experts, decent work team specialists in different areas of expertise who can talk to the summit, and they can see, let's say, the high quality of the ILO through the specialists that are availed to them. I take your point that when you are in a country where you are not resident, it's a slightly more difficult challenge. But if it's just an issue of logistical planning. If we want to demonstrate, our physical presence in entry, I can fly there with 2-3 specialists, and for that 1 2 days flood the place, let me see, with your excellence and expertise. And this, we get a lot of goodwill and appreciation in return. And it must start from the director, then to the specialist, and the colleagues who are working on the particular project. If we don't show this cumulative all ILO support, then debating what we are doing with this 13% becomes difficult. I agree.
I'd like to add some information on the program support cost discussion. In fact, for all the domestic funding that we receive in South Africa, I mean, Joni, we receive 13% PSI. And last year we did a little research, so we looked for how many domestic funded projects we receive 13% PSI, and it's in fact almost %. So I can really say that in most of the cases, negotiating 13% is not a problem.
Yeah.
If that's helpful, also in our case, it is not at all a problem.
And Geneva, would you add anything more?
You going to have questions to me later on, or?
Yes, I want to ask the other participants if they have any more questions for Joni. No, Anna, if you want to comment or add anything, please just go ahead.
Well, I was asked by Erlene to give a bit of an idea of the work we do in the environmental valuation field. For Latin America, that's very relevant because we've done for a very long period such direct trust funds in the Caribbean region. I will sound a little bit repetitive with what Joni said, but the point I would add is the area of actuarial services and social security is a very specialized area. And the reason countries come to the ILO is very much linked to the fact that social security schemes have been established with the assistance of the ILO since the 1950s. And so they are used to working with the ILO, and they are facing reforms that are difficult and so forth. They are not so much interested in our legal or our policy advice because they have pretty much these capacities in-house. What they want to know sometimes is what the countries have done. But what they are really looking after is actuarial expertise, because either they don't have it in-house or it's criticized by different parties. So just to remind everyone, when we present actuarial evaluation, the main outcome is to say your scheme is financially viable or it's not, and you need to increase contributions collected from all workers and employers by X%, or you need to cut benefits. So the results of our work is very politically sensitive. So they will come to the ILO because we're seen as neutral and fair, and we're not paid by the government on one side or the other, but are there to workers and employers equally. Also, the other key point is that such requests are coming to us normally. We rarely go forward to our services, barely any time have we done that. And when these requests come, have a history of having worked with them, then we always go back to that history. So the institutional memory is very important. And I'm going further back than even my own time in the ILO. And this is something that's really lacking nowadays in the ILO. If you go to Spain and you say, yeah, in the 70s, when I helped assist you, there was this problem, which you still have today, because you didn't resolve that issue that was recommended before, then it makes a big difference the way you engage with them and the way you also sort of your hands in the dirty water of figuring out what's the problem on their side. And besides the actuarial results, you need to understand their operations and what's wrong in their systems, so that you propose kind of solutions that will really bring a good outcome. Often they will not want to hear what we say, because we will often come up and say, look, people are retiring just too early in your country, so you need to have people retiring 5 or 6 years later, and they know that if they do this, their government will lose the next election. So, but the ILO, they know, is there to help them, and they know that we don't embarrass them. At the same time, as we come up with our advice, which is well grounded and robust into evidence and their actual situation, we always make sure that if we have some hard news, we don't come out with this hard news before being aware and them allowing us to come out with it. In case there's an agreement initially with social partners that they have to be fully consulted, we are very, very careful to not make the situation worse. And if there's corruption, then we have diplomatic but honest ways of getting ourselves out of the situation, because this rarely happens, but it has happened in the past. So the issue of trust and confidence is very important. It's also not to, I'm going a bit against the wind of the trend in the ILO of decentralization. So there needs to be a very close relationship internally between the country office and the actuaries who are running this. If you don't have an actuary in the decent work team to be liaising, then it's likely with the actuaries in Geneva. Unfortunately, there are not enough projects of this work for any specific region to justify having a full actuary in one region alone. This is a dream for us. So we tend to have to centralize, and the actuaries who are trained in the ILO models also, the fact is that we're grounded into the ILO principles and standards, and when they receive an actuarial evaluation from the ILO, we also refer to visions, and if there are cases that have been presented in the committee of experts, we do also refer to them. So they get a really good deal. Our projects are very low in amount. They are usually around 250, maybe 4,000. So they're time bound very strictly because the government usually is awaiting our reports. Our reports are tabled in Parliament very often. And as Tony said, the deliverables you have in the project document are not like very general, we're going to have 5 country briefs and blah, blah, blah. They know exactly what they want and when. So we need to be on the ball, and we cannot afford proceed, I'm not going to say nonsense, but we cannot afford, we're really in a client relationship, which is unusual for many people sometimes in the ILO context. So we're often under a lot of pressure because They want their reports, they want their presentations, they want a specific reform recalculated. So adding money to what was planned initially, if it takes too much time, then it gets sensitive for them. When we receive the request, we write a project document and we exchange with them on the content. So the details are quite minutious in terms of what they expect and the costing as well. So we have an overhead. Besides the 13%, we also have our backstopping and our ILO technical supervision, because we cannot implement all of these projects from A to Z. But we usually we have a team with a team of experts who are trained ILO experts, very senior, usually retired officials who are social security actuaries from countries or countries like Latin America. It's quite a number of good actuaries in the country. So we then go through the normal process with PARDEV and so forth, and then we implement. What's difficult for us is to say we cannot start on 1st of January, because 1st of January, if the money got in, if the system, the IRIS has not let the project being in and so forth, we can't start. So these are the constraints we face that are sometimes difficult to explain, but 10% is never a problem. They like to be very closely involved in the choice of the team who will be on the project. So this relationship with the actuaries in Geneva is very important, and if the field specialists in the area concerned, then it's also very important. And the country office is also, so the collaboration is very tight between all of us, and we need to be agile. And one of the things they like also very much is that include capacity building into our projects. So because they come back to us quite regularly, like every 5 years or so. So we will say, look, instead of doing a one-off project of 1 year, let's do it over 4 years, where you will get 2 actuarial evaluations, and you will train your staff, necessarily to be actuaries, because you need to follow a very specific academic track. But we will work with your statisticians, your IT, your different people to see how to scale up their capacity so that they can help more the management, ministerial people in charge of policy when they face difficult questions like what would be the cost of a new maternity benefit or something like that. So the relationship is very much more closer. And in the Caribbean, we've had a unique program in the late 90s. We've never managed to do this in other regions, unfortunately, but this should be a model. Each country wanted to work with us. So we said we have 9 or 10 Caribbean countries. We said, look, let's set up a program. But with PARDEV, we had to do separate products and direct trust funds with each of them. But nonetheless, under the program, we were able to hire a full-time senior actuary and junior actuary plus the supervising team in Geneva. And we were able to plan 2 actuarial evaluations for each country and annual training and annual knowledge sharing activities amongst them. And it has turned to be extremely useful because some of them have evolved into having their own actuarial capacities. We were able to encourage some of national staff to undertake the necessary studies to be themselves doing it afterwards, and it established a community of practice. So it's a probably very special experience, but let me tell you, when reforms happen, that I am called upon to help, and this is where we can have the biggest impact. So this is useful for your purposes.
Thank you, Anna. That was very exhaustive. Thank you for giving us this very broad and clear description of what's going on. Let's see if from participants we have questions. When I was speaking, did you recognize your working situation? Any clarification? It means that you were very clear. Second more. That's all it seems. Okay. If there are questions, we move ahead with the third question, which is about, well, first of all, the question is going to be for Tiffany and Agostina, which are based in Geneva, and also the recurring issues that colleagues meet when negotiating agreements for domestic funding. Please briefly introduce us. You work in finance.
Yes, so this is Sietse and Augustina. We both work in BudCT here in Geneva. We will be talking a little bit about the domestic funding agreement and the issues that we have seen over the time. So for this third webinar of today, it's going to be Augustina who's doing the presentation.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Well, I recognize most of the names on the list of participants, so you can contradict me whenever I say something that you don't agree with. But what we've seen lately with domestic agreements is that it's always much easier if, for example, the standard domestic template agreement is used. As most of you might know, there is a template that was drafted by PARDEV, Finance, and Endure. And this is a very comprehensive agreement that lists all main clauses that are necessary when doing finance at the domestic level. Because as you might, there are certain issues that are always problematic with the local governments and with all donors in particular. Florencio has mentioned one of them, the program support costs. And so we try to avoid as much as possible giving the opportunity to the donors of implementing their agreements if it's possible. And so the main suggestion would always be to try to approach the donors or the governments with this standard domestic funding template. One of the issues that we have made clear is that the ILO can't pre-finance. That is it's in our rules and regulations. We do not have our own funding to carrying out activities unless we get the money from the donors beforehand. So we've seen, for example, with Colombia, sometimes there are certain cases when we need the donor might want us to pre-finance, but unfortunately that is not a possibility for the ILO. And that's something that has to be taken into account when doing the budgets, that the budgets have to be with a payment schedule that is agreed. That way there is enough funds for implementing a project. And again, another issue, as raised earlier by Florencio, is the program support cost. The standard is 13%. That is the standard rate that has been calculated at an earlier point, and that is, those costs help us all across the office for certain costs, and we should stick to the 13%. If not acceptable at all, given the legislations at the local level, then another rate is possible, but that needs a waiver request. that has to be sent to, that to be approved by the treasurer, and it has to be addressed to Budfin, the head of. Also, we're saying is, and Joni made it clear that there's a lot of support that is offered from the local offices. And for example, I know in Latin America that there's a lot of consultants, for example, and certain projects, and there's the project is mostly activities, but it's not financing at all the support that the office is giving. So when you have to sell the 13%, you have to take into account that there's a lot of support that is going behind the project. And now it is the principle, the single audit principle. You might know that the ILO can only be audited by the internal and external auditors, and that is really not negotiable. We have sometimes, especially private sector, honestly, it's not so much as the domestic funding, but it's low internal and external auditors that can carry out an audit. And if the donor require it, it's a possibility, but it's to be requested to our external auditors. And the terms of reference should be negotiated and agreed with the ILO, and that is financed by the donor.
Yeah, sorry. So if a donor would like to have an audit, it will be requested to the Treasurer and Financial Controller of the ILO, who will contact our external auditors.
One point that we've seen that is sometimes an issue with agreements is that we need to that where standard financial statements are the ones that are used to report. That means that well, the has over 800 projects, so almost 800 active projects and over 150 donors. So we really have to try to keep the financial reporting standard. As we might fall through the cracks, not reporting the way that they request. And that means that the calendar year is the full year for the ILO. So we report on a yearly basis, and nation that except from the ILO accounts. However, this sometimes is negotiable, but it has to respect the calendar year. Another issue is that the ILO administers the contribution in accordance with its regulations, and that means also with its regulations, rules, directives, and procedures. And this is also applying to procurement rules and HR rules. So you should, when negotiating with a donor, with a government, do not try to impose these their own rules for particular example, the procurement rules to these projects. And then another is the in-kind contribution that we've recently seen the example of Colombia. It is a request from the government, and it's not possible. It's just that it's a big commitment to show that we are going to provide an in-kind contribution from the ILO when the resources are not available. Because as you know, we don't have our own, so we don't generate income. So it's most of the times from other projects that we get these in-kind contributions. And for that, there is a need to obtain written approval from the other donors that would be supposedly contributing to this project. And that, of course, is timely and not always accepted by the other donors, because the other donors also have their particular concerns maybe like would like to be audited, because there is that is using in-kind contribution, is considering another project as in-kind, it means that this other project would be subject to an audit, possibly subject to an audit, and this other donor would have to agree on that. I'm making myself clear. I can come back. And the issue is we win agreements in any currency. That is not an issue. But what we try and strongly encourage is that the funds are received in headquarters in the bank account, because this minimizes the risks of exchange rate losses. So we try to as always to receive the funds in Geneva, and perhaps like a full payment upfront or in a reduced number of payments following, of course, the implementation schedule, in order to avoid pre-financing. And this also gives you the chance to have a more accurate version of the budget available, because that way you know right the quantity in US dollars that you have available. The airline is in US dollars, and is why we tell you that you've received so much money. This is, you can budget to this amount. So that's what I try to do to avoid any risk currency fluctuation. We there are cases where for example, we were mentioning earlier in Egypt, in 1 month the currency dropped like 50%, and means that if it had been open the budget in Egyptian pounds, then all of a sudden the budget would have been reduced by half. So it's also to add predictability to your.
On that particular case, what we're trying to say is, if the donor would have paid the ILO an equivalent of $1 million in Egyptian pounds in Egypt, so it would be in local currency account, that would be the next day have been worth $500,000. What would have lost $500,000? As we budget based on the time that we received the money, we have recognized $1 million for a particular project. But then we would only have been able to have $500,000 available. So there's also $500,000 that needs to be covered. And it's just not possible. The ILO doesn't have the funding. That is where we say, if there are very small amounts, just allow it. We have done it now recently in South Africa. We have done it again recently in Chile. You request the approval upfront, your commitments to a donor, that's okay, be an approval from our Treasury Department. So 13%, if it to be reduced, you need to get it approved before the ILO makes any commitment to donor. Okay.
So sometimes it might seem lengthy, the process of approving an agreement, but as Anne might firm, when it's standard, it can go quite quickly, the agreement clearance. So what we try to encourage is that before anything is promised to the donor, is at least there's a check with PARDEV and BudCT or JUR to see what would be acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. to both Agostina and Sitza for this very clear explanation. Anyone from Latin America, like Alejandra or Blanca? We have Anna from Anna, you're not based in Latin America. Or Esmara, Brazil, do you have Patricia? Do you have any question? Is it all here?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Alejandra. Please.
This is Blanca from
I'm
Colombia.
Blanca. Alejandra is writing in the chat. So please go ahead. We hear you very well.
Just to thank you very much for this explanation about domestic funding. As you have been telling throughout the presentations, in Latin America, it's been trying to use this kind of funding. But particularly in my case, I'm the national coordinator for child labor here in Colombia. And I would like to know if you have any example, like about domestic funding using for this specific issue of child labor. This is my question. If you have maybe an example I could use here for me to use as a guide for trying to implement this kind of funding.
Out of my head, I think in Brazil there are some projects related to child labor, but I'll tell you the content of it. Sorry.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Maybe a comment for Blanca.
Okay.
Hello.
No, thank you. I just wanted to know if you had any specific example on child labor.
No, comment that I wanted to make, Blanca and Florencio from Lima, is the content of the project itself doesn't because of the fact that it's domestic funding. I mean, we just do a project following our guidelines in general, and we have several examples of child labor projects and models of intervention and everything you know that. So it's just a modality. I mean, we need to use the standard agreement form and follow the things that were taught by Agustina right now. So in respect to the project contents and formats and etc., it's not that we have to follow a specific format. We just can get any of the child labor projects that we have done in the region, and that may help you to develop a proposal.
Okay, I asked this question because I have been, having contact with governments here in Colombia, and some of them are interested. But the thing is that I'm quite young in the ILO because I've been here for 1 year, so I don't really know how to start. How to start with the proposal and how does it work for me in child labor issues. But I'm sure in case anything like specific comes through, I can always talk to you, and maybe you could give me some advice on how to implement this domestic funding.
Absolutely, yes.
Exactly. Thank you, Florencio.
I think we're having trouble again hearing you. Picking up again.
Oh. Okay. See,
No. We could.
too. What a pity. No.
And yeah,
Okay,
you're
good.
back.
Okay. Sometimes time goes away and we don't understand why. Yeah.
Network.
Okay, yeah, it's just network. Okay, I was saying that the resources are available at the link that I've put in the chat. So, Blanca, for example, you can find some fact sheets there.
There will be screencast next week.
And then there will also be other resources that could be as helpful for all the other participants. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, the floor to Aline for the final messages. I mean, if you can recap what are the crucial messages and what is your, let's say, advice for colleagues who are working or have to work with domestic funding. And the floor is yours.
The crucial message is something that both Joni and Anne brought forth very clearly, and that is that developing a strong relationship with the government is a prerequisite to mobilizing domestic funding. I mean, that's really where you need to invest your time. For the more technical issues on the agreement, it's just a matter of contacting PARDEF and BudgetC as early as possible in the process. When signing an agreement or when drafting project documents, you can also use the resources on the PARDEF intranet, where we have numerous how-to guides, templates, and whatnot. I think by next week we will also have a screencast on mobilizing domestic funding available, and it's something that you could listen to whenever you have time.
Good, Celine. Johnny, Agostina, Steve, anything you like to add?
Mentioned, and again in the closing comments of Arlene, please keep us informed as early as possible. This will help us provide you the right information and avoid any possible frustrations.
And I my side is just to say to colleagues, don't let the logistics of the approvals and the rules get into the strategic objective of getting the national authorities and getting the authorities to pay for what are interventions. I think the colleagues in Geneva in particular are always very helpful in finding a solution. And use that as the reason for not pursuing a more important objective of domestic national resources. Thank you.
If I could just add that, I noticed it's true that you can see, for example, Chile, South Africa, and all the offices that have started using domestic funding. It's a constant effort, and there's projects keep going, or there's new projects with the same ministries. So once the relationship is established, I think it's a positive example that it continues.
Okay, Agostina? Okay. Okay, if the participants do not have other questions or comments, I think we can close. I would like to thank, Florence is also thanking everyone. And from my side as well, Johnny, Agostina, and Arlene, and Anna as well. You have been with us for 3 webinars today with Central Asia, Aerospace, and Africa, and Latin America. That was very much useful and appreciated. Thank you very much for being with us. And thank you very much to all the participants who have been with us during this webinar. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Monica. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Tony. And
Bye.
Goodbye. Bye. Bye-bye.